All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Good evening.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Good.
All right.
So far.
All right. Let's get this source sheet up. There it is. And let's zoom in so everyone can see. Is that good?
A little bigger?
That's good.
A little bigger.
Bigger, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Okay. We are in Parshat Tetzaveh.
Oh, Tetzaveh, that's the one.
Yeah. So Parshat Tetzaveh, one of my favorite things to note every year is that from the beginning of Sefer Shmot through the end of Chumash, this is the only parsha that does not mention Moshe's name.
Oh,
So there's many explanations given for that. My favorite explanation is that the parsha deals primarily with the Big Day Kahuna. The what happened to my? Can you guys not see me?
No.
You've
What
already
happened to
given us the pages. You've already put them up.
Right, but why I should be visible?
I can see
Huh.
you. I can see you.
You can see me.
Yeah.
I
No.
can't see me.
oh,
Okay.
I can see Judy.
I can't see you. It's just
Ken.
black.
Yeah, it just looks like
There's
it's just
Cheryl.
black. I don't know why.
It's just black.
Can everybody else see you? See you? I can.
I don't know how to fix that.
Mhm.
Self-view. All right. I'm not sure what to do about that. Sorry. Just have to look at everyone else's beautiful face tonight. So it doesn't have the name of Moshe. One of the beautiful explanations for that is that this is a parsha that focuses on the Kohanim, and the Kohen Gadol in particular, and the various clothing and things that they wore, and so that this is Moshe kind of taking a step back to allow his brother Aharon to be in the spotlight, which is a beautiful thought. There's some other another interesting suggestion is that after the sin of the golden calf, which we'll read about next week, but that, and that, as we mentioned, there's a whole debate about the chronology of all this stuff. But whatever Moshe says, forgive the Jewish people. If not, erase me from the book that you, right? Moshe says, either save the entire nation, or I want nothing to do with this as well. So this is sort of a little bit of the fulfillment of Moshe's request, or whatever it is, that his name is erased not from the entire Torah, but from one parsha of the Torah. So anyway, that's just an interesting tidbit, thing to think about. As we said though, the parsha opens with the description of what we refer to as the Ner Tamid, as the continuous light flame that was lit in the Beis Hamikdash. I think we spoke about that last year or 2 years ago in the Parsha Shir. And then the rest of it is basically talking about these Big Day Kahuna, the clothes that the Kohanim wore, and the special clothes that the Kohen Gadol wore in his service in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's introduced in source number 1. V'yatza hakreve lechet Aharon achicha v'et banav ito mitoch b'nei Yisrael l'chahanoli Aharon Nadav v'avihu Elazar v'Itamar b'nei Aharon. Shall bring forward your brother Aaron with his sons from among the Israelites to serve me as priests. Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar, the sons of Aharon. Vasita bigdei kodesh la'Aaron achicha l'chavoda l'tifaret. You shall make holy clothing for Aharon your brother as a source of kavod and tiferet, of dignity and adornment. V'ata tidaber el kol chachmei lev asher mileti ruach chachma. And you shall speak to all those with wise hearts, with whom I have filled with wisdom. and they will make the clothing for Aharon to sanctify him, to be a priest, to be a Kohen for me. Ve'ela habigadim asher ya'asu, these are the clothing, these are the vestments that they should make for Aharon. Choshen, ephod, me'il, ketonet, tashbetz, mitznefet, ve'avnet. The clothing are a breastplate, an ephod, which we translate as an apron, a robe, a fringed or checkered tunic, a headdress, and a sash. They shall make holy clothing for Aaron your brother and for his children, so that they shall be priests for me. All right, so these are the big day kahuna, these are the clothing, and as we said with the Mishkan, right, we can focus on sort of big picture, try to understand an overarching goal or message, or we can focus in on the details. And tonight we're going to focus in on the details of one of these, we'll call it clothing, although it's not really, I wouldn't, more of an adornment or jewelry. That is the nechosh, the choshen, the breastplate.
Mhm.
Okay, so we all can sort of picture the breastplate that Aharon had, that the Kohen Gadol had. It had four, right? It had 4 rows of stones. Well, let's read about it in source number 2. I won't know how to translate all it, so I'll just go to the English as well. Ve'asita choshen mishpat ma'aseh choshev k'ma'aseh ephod tasenu zahav techelet vargaman tolat shani v'shesh marzar ma'aseh ta'aseh oto. You shall make a breastpiece of decision worked into a design, make it in the style of the ephod, make it of gold, of blue, purple, crimson yarns, in a fine twisted linen. It shall be square and doubled, a span in length and a span in width. Set in it mounted stones in 4 rows of stones. The first row shall be a row of carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald. The second row, turquoise, sapphire, and amethyst. The third row, jacinth, agate, and crystal. And the fourth row, beryl, lapis lazuli, and jasper. I wouldn't recognize any of these stones if you showed them to me. And I'm really not sure where the translations come from. They shall be framed with gold in their mountings. The stones shall correspond in number to the names of the sons of Israel, 12 corresponding to their names. They shall be engraved like seals, each with its name for the 12 tribes. On the breastpiece, make braided chains of corded work in pure gold. Make 2 rings of gold on the breastpiece and fasten the 2 rings at the 2 ends of the breastpiece, attaching the 2 golden cords to the 2 rings at the ends of the breastpiece. Then fasten the 2 ends of the cords to the 2 frames, which you shall attach to the shoulder pieces of the ephod at the front. Make 2 rings of gold and attach them to the other ends of the breastpiece at its inner edge, which face the ephod, and make 2 other rings of gold and fasten them on the front of the ephod, low on the 2 shoulder pieces. Close it to its seam above the decorated band. The breastpiece shall be held in place by a cord of blue from its rings to the rings of the ephod, so the breastpiece rests on the decorated band and does not come loose from the ephod. Aaron shall carry the names of the sons of Israel on the breastpiece of decision over his heart when he enters the sanctuary for remembrance before Hashem at all times. Inside the breastpiece of decision you shall place the Urim and Tumim so that they are over Aaron's heart when he comes before Hashem. Thus Aaron shall carry the instrument of decision for the Israelites over his heart before Hashem at all times. All right. Yes, Gwen.
Can I ask a question about the instrument of decision?
Yes.
What does that really mean?
That's a wonderful question. That's what I wanted to try to focus on tonight. It's thank you. That was a beautiful setup.
Well, I'm surprised nobody else asked that.
So it's I mean for the translation, I don't love this translation. I think it comes from the fact that included on this breastplate was the Urim Vitumim, which again I don't know how to translate it. How did it translate it here?
Isn't.
It's not. It just says Urim and Tumim, right?
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, place the Urim and Tumim. So the Urim and Tumim were some sort of stones or something that lit up, and along with the different stones representing the different tribes were a way of the Kohen Gadol to communicate with Hashem. So when the best example is when they were to go out to war, or when they wanted to go out to war, the Kohen Gadol would have to consult with the Urim V'Tumim to see if this was a sanctioned and justified war to go in or not. And there's other sources that talk about other sort of difficult questions that were posed to the Kohen Gadol, that or that the king could come to the Kohen Gadol in order to consult with these Urim V'Tumim and help in decision making. So that's where I think that translation comes from. But if we think of, right, the Hebrew phrase is Choshen Mishpat. What does the phrase Mishpat mean?
Judgment.
Judgment, or yeah, judgment. I mean, in modern Hebrew, Mishpat is a sentence, like not a sentence of what you convict someone of, but a sentence like when you speak in sentences. But judgment is how we normally would translate mishpat. The fact that here it's decision making is in itself already kind of influenced by what we know from later sources. But right, if you look in source number 3, Parshat Mishpatim, which was the long list of civil laws that we read 2 weeks ago, opens Ve'ele HaMishpatim Asher Tasim Lifnehem. These are the rules that you shall put before them. That's how we normally translate Mishpat. It would either be judgment or the rules. So what does it mean here that this Choshen is a Choshen Mishpat? That's question number 1. We'll come back to that question. Gwen, excellent question. The other detail I wanted to focus on, again, we could have some fun. I think Martha Landau one year gave a Dvar Torah trying to understand the different stones. She
did.
had some visuals. Does anyone else remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So that would be a fun exercise. But the other thing I wanted to focus on is in verse 28. So I'll read the Hebrew. You can follow in the English. Vayirkisu et hachoshen mitabotav et tabot ha'efod biftil techelet liot al cheshev ha'efod velo yizach hachoshen me'al ha'efod. The breastpiece shall be held in place by a cord of blue from its rings to the rings of the ephod, so that the breastpiece rests on the decorated band and does not come loose from the ephod. Okay, so there's this, there's this way that it's set up. The Kohen Gadol would wear all sorts of clothing, and one of the elements of clothing was an ephod that is like an apron, like a work apron, right? They were basically butchering animals all day in the Beis Hamikdash, so they would wear an apron to cover up and I guess to get the blood or whatever. So this choshen, this breastplate, had to be attached to the ephod, to the apron, in a way that it would not move. It would remain set and rigid in place.
But wouldn't that also be splattered with
Yeah,
blood?
so I think, right, if you remember in the on Yom Kippur, we read about the avoda, the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. And part of it's like there's some beautiful tunes associated with it, but we sort of go through it pretty quickly. And if I know one time we spent some time with Yishai Ribo's beautiful song, Seder HaAvoda, the order of the worship of the service. But a lot of those details is they were constantly changing clothes. in and out of the the special Kohen Gadol clothes versus the regular Kohen clothes. So they wouldn't wear this Choshen when they were involved in things that would ruin it. So there's, but yeah, it's a good question. That's another good question. But so anyway, when they were instructed to wear the Choshen, it had to be worn in a way that it would not move, that it was set in place and did not move. So I wanted to spend some time tonight looking at why that might be. The bulk of the shir will be we haven't really looked at anything from Rabbi Foreman. Well, I think we used some of his podcast material, but from his book, we haven't seen anything in a while. And I actually just ordered, hot off the presses, is his third volume on Sefer Vayikra. So once we get to Sefer Vayikra, maybe we'll get to learn some new material from him. But before we get there, just a couple of sort of, for our purpose, side comments, because this isn't really what we're going to do with it. But one idea is brought both by Menachem ben Zion Sachs, whom we've seen before. He was a rabbi, I believe, born in Israel, but he spent most of his career in Chicago, if I recall correctly. And then Rabbi Beryl Wine, also from Chicago. If you ever heard Rabbi Wine speak, you can't miss that Chicago accent. So Rabbi Sachs says as follows, commenting on the fact that it can't move. Hamezia choshen me'al hefod loke. If you remove or move this breastplate from the ephod, from the apron, you receive rabbinic lashes. Shene'emar lo yizach choshen me'al ephod, as it says, it can't move from the ephod. Ephod haya kamin sinar shalovshim b'shat avoda. The ephod was an apron that you wear during times of worship. Ephod haya ephod semel shel avoda. So the ephod symbolizes the worship, and worship means we often think of avoda as prayer, but avoda is the sacrificial worship. Amal v'yagia kapayim, and this is like hard labor, right? This is really getting yourself dirty. This is real work. V'choshen hayu urim v'tumim v'shem hamifarash, and the choshen, the breastplate, had on it the urim v'tumim and the shem hamifarash, God's explicit name. HaChoshen haya efo semel shel elokut v'torah. So the choshen is a symbol of divinity, spirituality, and of Torah. Shnehem yachad hitzigu mizug haramoni shel Torah v'avoda. So two of them together, the ephod and the choshen, the apron and the breastplate, represent this idea of Torah v'avoda, which of course is made popular by Bnei Akiva, right? That's the motto of Bnei Akiva is Torah v'avoda, Torah and work. And for Bnei Akiva, right, it started with the early Zionists settling the land of Israel, refers to the work of the land. But Torah v'avoda means Torah, learning Torah, and avoda, the service, the getting your hands dirty work. V'ha mechisho et harayon v'himchishu et harayon harba'avot. Right. So this idea is echoed or emphasized in Pirkei Avot. Yafer Talmud Torah im derech eretz sheyigat shnehem mashkechet avon. Torah study goes well with derech eretz, with work, because when you're involved in both of them, then you will not have time for sin, right? You'll be too busy studying and working. You won't have opportunity or freed, mind space to revert to sin. B'chol Torah she'eni ma'melacha sofa b'teilah v'goreret avon, and any Torah that's not accompanied by work, in the end, will not endure. Lachein ala choshen v'ephod liyot tamid merukasim yachtav v'yizach hachoshen me'al ephod. So therefore, the choshen and the ephod have to always be connected to symbolize these two modes of worshiping God, of serving God, and that's why it can't move. Okay, so and Rabbi Wine says something similar. So that's just one explanation of sort of the symbolism of the two of them. and why they have to always be connected in this way that the Torah describes. Rabbi Foreman takes it in a very different way. So before I can do that, any thoughts or reactions to this first explanation of not moving the Choshen from the ephod?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a variation on the symbols.
Yeah.
The Rebbe also emphasizes a somewhat similar idea in a way, I think. He talks about the back of the apron and the shoulders, and then the breastplate itself being the major thing in the front. So the back represents that which is external and mundane,
Mm-hmm.
aspects of life that may be necessary, but they're not the main focus of our interest. Just as when we show disinterest in something by turning our back on it, you know.
Right.
In the front signifies, he says, the internal and the sublime, the real focus of our interest for our own, just as our inner thoughts and feelings are expressed on the face, the front. So he's making an analogy between the breastplate as the, I guess, the place of communication and the human face, and then the back of the ephod as the things that we are not as interested in. Maybe you could say it that way. I don't know. The fact that the breastplate must not become disconnected means that the high priest cannot endure any gap between the sublime and the mundane, the internal and the external.
Mm.
They both have to be expressed together in both.
Interesting.
So it's not that the mundane is not being embraced. It certainly is, and it's immediately tied. He's got extra hooks along the back and everything. It's tied to the back in 4 places, actually.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not a trivial. This is not just 1 or 2 or something.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So as you know, for those who were in shul this past Shabbos, right? I talked about the dangers of symbolism, of trying to find meaning in symbolism all the time, that sometimes it can go too far. So yeah, not to say what you're, and not that what you're saying is going too far, but just that when we're looking at symbolism of things, there's many different ways we can understand the symbolism. And oftentimes all of them are correct, and they all contribute to the whole picture. So that's a beautiful thought from the Rebbe. Thank you. Rabbi Foreman takes this idea back to Parshat Mishpatim in source number 4. I brought just a few psukim to give us a little bit of the context of what's going on here. But again, Parshat Mishpatim is really a laundry list of various rules, and whether there is a connection or not, we can talk about when we come back to Parshat Mishpatim. But chapter 23 opens, Lo tisa shem hashav, al teshet yadcha imasha liot eit chamas. Do not carry false rumors. Don't collaborate to act as a malicious witness. Don't follow the majority if they're doing the wrong thing. Do not favor a poor person in their fight. If you encounter the ox of your enemy or his donkey wandering around lost, you shall return it to them. If you see your enemy's donkey struggling under the weight that it's carrying, you have to help out the animal. You can't just ignore it. And then the pasuk that we're concerned with, Mishpat evyoncha berivo. You shall not subvert the rights of your needy in their disputes. So Rabbi Foreman picks up on this verse, Lo tateh mishpat evyoncha berivo. which we translated as "You shall not subvert the rights of your needy in their disputes." Wants to know what is the word tateh, lehatot.
I have a translation of pervert,
Pervert.
to
Okay,
pervert justice, not pervert justice.
So the most literal translation would probably be incline, right? We saw that this is why I brought it, in verse number 2, Lo ta'aneh al riv lin tot acharei rabim lehatot. I didn't see how it translated here. You shall not give perverse testimony in disputes so as to pervert it in favor of the mighty. Not doesn't help us so much. But right, you shouldn't lean tot acharei rabim. You shouldn't be inclined to follow the majority. Just because everyone else is saying it or all the cool kids are doing it doesn't mean you should do it. So tateh means to be inclined. And right, we can go, let's just skip forward to source number 9, where he spells this out a little bit more. The language of the verse is instructive. The Hebrew tateh literally means to incline. In this context, it seems to mean that we must ensure that the mishpat of the poor, the judgment or the decision of regard relating to this poor person, lies straight and even, which is to say it needs to be fair. The destitute among us need to be able to advance their reeve, their cause or complaints on a level playing field. So if this is the case, he says that there's this interesting parallel being set up between our pasuk and our concern with the Choshen, with the breastplate, which is not allowed to move, not the same verb, lo yizach, it can't move, and this, right, and it's the Choshen Mishpat, the Choshen, the breastplate of justice, of law, or right, of decision making, as our translation had, and this idea of Mishpat, of the poor person, which also is lo tateh, can't be inclined. You can't tilt the scales one way or the other, right? So so if you look, for example, in I think the Chizkuni is a bit more clear than the Bechor Shor, but Bechor Shor and Chizkuni basically say the same thing. Lo tateh mishpat evyoncha b'yivo kedei l'chayvo bedin. Don't right, don't tilt the scales, don't tilt the judgment of the poor person when they have a dispute in order to make them culpable in judgment. Zo hazara l'dayan. This is a warning to the judge. Af al pi shelo tazkiru, even though you won't shelo hiskiru, even though it wasn't mentioned. Dugma lifnei Hashem lokecha tochlenu. This isn't exactly what I thought he was saying. So the Bechor Shor, perhaps then, let's just look there quickly. Do not rest the judgment of your poor to find him culpable. We were already warned about above not to find him innocent unfairly, right? So the poor person has to be protected, or the Mechilta, number 8, lo tateh mishpat evyoncha ma ani tzarich, v'alo kvar ne'emar lo tateh mishpat. Echad ani v'echad ashir. So the Mechilta asks, we already have a pasuk. Again, we already have, although it's in Sefer Devarim, so this would be the first appearance, but we already have a pasuk that says, lo tateh mishpat, not to perverse or to incline, to skew judgment. Echad ani v'echad ashir. And there's no distinction. It applies equally whether it's a case of a poor person or a rich person. Ma tamu lomar lo tateh mishpat evyoncha. So why does our pasuk in Sefer Shmot say not to skew the judgment of a poor person? Ze evyon b'mitzvot. This refers not to a poor person who is who is perhaps disadvantaged in front of the court, but rather it means someone who is poor, impoverished in mitzvot. Shelo tomar rashahu cheskatohu mishaker. Right? You might think if someone is not so religious, is not so observant, that we can therefore presume that they're lying in this case as well. They're presumed guilty because they're not religiously scrupulous. Right? And therefore, the one who is more religiously observant, we could presume maybe they're not going to lie. No, even if someone is not a scrupulously observant Jew, we still have to treat them absolute fairly in all matters of judgment. That's what the Mechilta adds. Then Rabbi Foreman points out other times where we have this similar construct of mishpat of X, right? The sentence, the judgment of so and so. So again, in Parshat Mishpatim, source number 10, Kimkor ishet bitola ama lo tetzeket teta avadim. If a man sells his daughter as a maidservant, she shall not go out like all other slaves. Im ra'a b'nei adonai asher lo yidada v'hefda le'am nochri lo yimshol lemocha b'vigdo ba. If the person who acquired her, the master, doesn't like her, he cannot set her free to anyone. Im livno yadena k'mishpat habanot ya'aseh. And if the master marries this maidservant to his son, he must treat her kimishpat habanot, according to the rules that all women, all wives are treated. Imachereti kachlo, if this son takes an additional wife, sheira kisuta bonata lo yigva, he can't withhold any of the marital obligations to this first wife, even though she came from a seemingly disadvantaged position. But there we have the phrase mishpat habanot in source number 12 in Sefer Devarim. Kitiana le'ish shtei nashim, again a case of two different wives. Hachat ahuva v'achat snua v'yaldu lo vanim ahuva v'asnua. One that is more beloved than the other one. And each of these wives have sons. Vaya ben habechor lasniya, and the firstborn, the bechor, is born to the least favored wife. Haya biyom hanchilot benav et asher yelo lo yuchal livaker et ben ava al pnei ben hasnora bechor. On the day when the husband gives his inheritance away, or sets up his will, he cannot favor the son of his more loved wife over the son of the less loved wife. But rather, if the least favored wife gave birth first, then the Bechor belongs to her, and that child is entitled to a double inheritance. Because this is in fact the firstborn son, he has the Mishpat HaBechorah. The Mishpat, the law, the judgment, the sentence of the firstborn, that's what he's entitled to. And finally, in source number 13, Lo Tateh Mishpat Ger Yatom, V'lo Tachvol Beged Almana. You shall not subvert the rights of the stranger or the fatherless, nor shall you take a widow's garment in pawn. And you shall remember that you were a servant in Egypt and God redeemed you. Therefore, you must treat the servants or the lower class individuals fairly. But again, mishpat ger yatom, the mishpat, the sentence, the rule of a stranger or father or orphan. So Rabbi Foreman notes, in case after case, the mishpat of X seems to be a phrase that demands fair treatment for the naturally disadvantaged. The phrase mishpat of X somehow always seems to make an appearance in the Torah's text when justice is at risk of tilting away from the powerless. Okay, so lo tateh mishpat, don't incline or tilts the scales of justice of the poor. Remember, and that's supposed to evoke for us, or that's supposed to come to mind as we read the pasuk of Lo Yizach Choshen HaMishpat, that the Choshen Mishpat, the breastplate of Mishpat, cannot move. Not the same verb, but the same idea. And so Rabbi Foreman then says in number 15, the Torah seems to be saying that the Kohen Gadol should wear the Choshen representing the Mishpat of Israel for a reason, to remind the judge of the perils of inclined judgment. But while the Torah reminds an earthly judge of the perils of inclined judgment, astoundingly, in the case of a needy community, the Torah seems to bid the Kohen Gadol to remind the judge in heaven of much the same. What's the role of the Kohen Gadol when he is doing the service in the Beis HaMikdash?
He's speaking with Hashem.
He's speaking with Hashem. He's not the judge, right? He's petitioning. He's pleading with God. He's offering atonement on behalf of the people. And so just as earthly judges need this strong reminder that they cannot incline judgment or tilt judgment one way or the other, according to this explanation, the message of the Kohen Gadol's Choshen not moving is to remind God, as it were, as if God needs a reminder, but also to remind the Kohen Gadol, who is offering petitions on behalf of the nation, that our judgment should not be inclined either. He says this goes one step further, because in a right, we can even spell it a little bit clearer. How was the Choshen attached to the ephod? How was the breastplate attached to the apron?
There were circular, there were loops and then pieces of gold that were
Right.
made to a chains, into
Right,
chains.
right. I thought there was another detail. Maybe I'm confused. Anyway, another thing that the Kohen Gadol wore, in addition to this Choshen, is he wore a tzitz. He wore some sort of crown or tiara, hat, something on his head. And on the tzitz was engraved, was the word Kodesh La Hashem, holy to God. And we read there, source number 16, V'asita tzitz zahav tahor, ufitachta alav pituchei chotam kodesh lashem. You shall make, they translate it as a frontlet of pure gold, and engrave on it the seal inscription, holy to Hashem. V'samta oto al petil techelet. You shall place this tzitz, this crown, as it were, on a petil techelet, a string of techelet. V'haya al hamitznefet al mul pnei hamitznefet yeh. It should be on the cap that the Kohen Gadol wore over his hair. V'haya al meitzach Aharon v'nasa Aharon et avon hakodashim asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael l'chol matznot kadshehem. V'haya al mitzcho tamid l'ratzon lahem lifnei Hashem. And this tzitz and the mitznefet shall be on the forehead of Aharon, and he shall carry the burden of the kodshim, of the sanctified objects that Bnei Yisrael will sanctify, with all of the gifts, all the sacrifices that they offer, and it will always be on his forehead as to win acceptance for them before Hashem. Does this tzitz remind you of anything else?
Tessis.
Say again.
To fill in.
Tzitzis, right?
Oh.
Hakanaf pitil techelet. On the tzitzis, we're supposed to have a pitil techelet, a thread, a string of techelet. just like the tzitz was held in place by a Pitil Techelet. What's the purpose of the tzitzit?
To remind you of Hashem.
Remember all the commandments that are.
Okay, so
Based
we
on
have
all
a
the
few
things
different
that-
things. So Lou, I think what you were referring to is actually the Techelet itself. The Techelet, the Gemara tells us, Techelet dome liyam, biyam dome lirakia, virakia dome lekisei hakavod. The color Techelet is similar to the sea, and the sea in color is similar to the sky or to the heavens, and the heavens is similar to the Kisei HaKavod, to the throne of glory. So somehow seeing the Techelet is meant to, through these associations, bring us to have an awareness of Hashem, or a thought of Hashem, of God's throne of glory. And you were referring to the tzitzit proper, and there we read, right? We say this every day as part of Kriyat Shema. Tzaveh b'nei Yisrael v'amarta leihem v'yasu lahem tzitzit al kanfei v'tehem l'dorotam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf v'til techelet. Speak to the children of Israel; they shall have tzitzit, these fringes or tassels on the corners of their clothing, and they shall have with the tzitzit a thread of techelet. Vayalachem letzitzit, it shall be for you tzitzit, or item oto, uschartem et kol mitzvot Hashem, vasitem otam. When you see it, you'll remember all of God's commandments, and you will do them. And you won't follow after the trappings of your heart or of your eyes. In order that you will remember and do all of my commandments and be holy to God. So the tzitzit are supposed to somehow remind us or keep us in check, so that we do that which we are supposed to do, follow Hashem's commandments. Right? So some say it's sort of just, if you're wearing tzitzit, and if you wear your tzitzit so it's visible to the rest of the world, so it's just like wearing a kippah, wearing a tichel, wearing a noticeably, call a long skirt, or the Beis Yaakov uniform or whatever, right? It's, if you're wearing things that identify you as an Orthodox Jew, so then you always have to be conscious of what the world's going to think of you, and therefore not act inappropriately. So that's one way that the tzitzit might do that. But the other way is back to what we said about the associative memories. That tzitzit, the word, according to many, comes from what we see in Shir HaShirim. My beloved is like a gazelle or like a young stag. There he stands behind our wall, grazing through the window, peering through the lattice. Tzitzit comes from the verb to peer or to glance. So we're supposed to look at the tzitzit and remember that we can't go astray. So bringing this all together, Rabbi Foreman makes the following suggestion. Okay, so how does the idea of gazing at something figure into both these articles of clothing? So we've already explained how gazing at tzitzit helps with remembering God and acting properly. But what of the apparent counterpoint to the tzitzit, the Kohen Gadol's tzitz? The link between the two garments suggests that perhaps it too was meant to be gazed at. The question is, by whom? The tzitz is positioned on the one place on its wearer's body, his forehead, where it is literally impossible for him to ever view it. So who is supposed to see the tzitz? We humans have our tzitzit, but reciprocally, perhaps God has a version of tzitzit too. The Kohen Gadol's tzitz. Each serves as a kind of reminder. For after all, we have responsibility, and God has a reciprocal responsibility. We are meant to gaze at our tzitzit and remember the divine God and remember the laws we are meant to keep. For by keeping those laws, we can hope to refine ourselves. We can hope to become more holy. And as for God, he is to look at the Kohen Gadol's seats and remember too that we are trying to become holy, as mortal and as earthly and as flawed as we are. So the bringing it all together, the suggestion that he's making is that the symbolism of the Choshen not moving is to teach us, right, that we have to just is to serve as this symbolic illusion, reminder, parallel to the fact that just as we can't skew judgment of the vulnerable, of those whom we might or might naturally be overlooked or disfavored in a court of law, so too we're reminding God that we're poor, humble, lowly people. We have Yetzer Hara, we have a temptation, we have our vices. We're not perfect, and God might, set standards that are too high, or hold us to those standards that are impossible for us to realize, to live up to. And so the reminder is that we want God to treat us in the same way of untilted, unskewed judgment, that we should be judged fairly. And that as the Kohen Gadol is petitioning God on our behalf, that's the message that he's carrying with him, right? It also serves as a reminder for the Kohen Gadol as our representative that we're an imperfect people, and therefore he should be, have even more compassion for us in presenting our case than perhaps he would have already. That's the suggestion that's made. Again, by the symbolism of the Choshen Mishpat not moving in the same way that judgment cannot be skewed or cannot move, and as embodied by the tzitz, that seems to also echo this same message of having to judge everything fairly and objectively, and not being at too high standards. That's the theory. That's a suggestion. Are there any reactions to what Rabbi Foreman is proposing?
Well, there's another way to expand it from Rav Hirsch, who instead of accepting inclining as the basic meaning, the root metaphor, he rather accepts something that is spread evenly over a surface. So that's how we come closer to something like understanding Mata as a bed, a tribe as an extension of a family, things like that. And so the fact that the Choshen Mishpat had to be secured on all sides meant that it would be fully stretched out and completely there, so that it implies then this there is he brings examples of distortion and deviation, but it not only, which this I think this is beautiful. I mean, the mishpat and the even scales of judgment and so on, and keeping it sort of straight. But the way people move around, I don't know exactly, with that, but certainly having all of the corners of it, all four corners of it stretched out, means that the whole Torah is there, the whole presence of Hashem is there, and we are to be sure to not distort by turning up one corner and forgetting to do it, that kind of idea.
Okay. Beautiful.
So that's another riff on
Yeah.
what he is saying, but I would imagine that there are other ways to expand it. I just thought of
Yeah. So what I like about this is it really is, right? Gwen picked up on it right away, that it's a strange description of the Choshen to call it the Choshen Mishpat. Right? Especially, it's certainly if you're translating it as the breastplate of decision making, but even if you're calling it the breastplate of mishpat, of justice, or of law, it's a strange description of what the Kohen Gadol is wearing. And so this really makes a nice connection between the use of the word mishpat with relation to the Choshen and mishpat as it appears elsewhere in Chumash, which I think is very powerful. And once we have that connection, so I think the rest of it follows nicely. It's a nice message. The question of does God need these reminders is an interesting question.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there are many who would take issue with that God doesn't need the reminders. And, maybe we could find some other symbolism as far as what the Kohen Gadol is supposed to be thinking or something like that. But I really, as I think you've seen, I really appreciate this type of approach, and Rabbi Foreman is truly masterful at it. This was a new way of thinking about the Choshen for me. And just I'll add one thing. He begins his essay by noting that so many books of Jewish law take their names from these items of the Kohen Gadol's dress. So, for example, right, moving chronologically, the first systematized book of Jewish law is we call it the Torah, but it's really the Daled Turim or the Arba Turim, the four. We call it the four pillars or the four columns, which was, and then the Shulchan Aruch follows the same format, but that name comes from the 4 rows of stones on the Kohen Gadol's Choshen, on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. And then, there's so many commentaries on on the Shulchan Aruch, on Talmud, that also take, that are very, he spends a lot of time talking about the Ketzos HaChoshen, which was written by Reb Aryeh Leib Heller. But the Ketzos HaChoshen is one of the most lumdish, analytical, yeshivish svarim, right? It's learned in the highest level yeshivas around the world. Ketzos HaChoshen means the corners, the edges of the Choshen, of the breastplate. And that's where the loops were made in order to attach it to the ephod. So this idea about the symbolism of the Choshen really carries through towards our entire approach in relation to halacha, to the details, to the nitty-gritty of Jewish law, by these creative names that are taken from these objects and this symbolism. So it's a very rich, beautiful idea. I hope
I
that
had
this
just one more thought.
one more thought. Yeah.
Just one more. Another way it's used is talked about pitching a tent. So I was thinking of Yaakov and being in the tent.
Uh-huh.
So it's like Aaron is in the tent of Torah, but it's closely tied to his daily apron,
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So which is just an explanation that bolsters an earlier point that you made.
Right. So that's Parshat Tetzaveh, or one small aspect of Parshat Tetzaveh. Again, hope to see everyone in shul this coming Shabbos. And we'll meet again next week on Zoom. Have a great week.
You too.
So
Thank you.
much,
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Lila Tov.
Yeah,
Great.
it's a gem.